Trump stood at the podium with his arms spread wide, his smile holding the particular confidence of a man who believed he was about to win a fight he had started 3 hours before he walked through the door. He had just called Obama's library a monument to failure. He had just said, to a room full of donors and journalists and people who had paid to be in a building that bore Obama's name, that the only thing worth preserving in the place was the gift shop where people could buy hats that said "Make America Great Again." The laughter had been immediate and loud, and Trump had basked in it the way he always basked in laughter that seemed to be on his side. He did not see Obama standing at the edge of the stage with his hands folded, watching. He did not see the expression on Obama's face, which was not anger, which was not embarrassment, which was not any of the things Trump was expecting when he decided to attack. Obama's face was calm. Obama's face was the face of a man who had been waiting for exactly this moment and had just received confirmation that it had finally arrived. In approximately 12 seconds, Trump's smile would freeze in place. He would open his mouth to say something else and nothing would come out. He would stand at that podium in a building that was named after Barack Obama and realize that he had made a mistake that could not be undone, that he had walked into a room that belonged to someone else and forgotten to check whose name was on the deed. But right now, in this moment, he was still smiling. He was still performing. He had no idea what was about to happen to him. This is a channel about those moments, the ones most people miss because they leave too early. The ones where something shifts in a room that you cannot see from the outside but you can feel when you are standing in it. We are going to spend some time in this room together, and I want you to notice what happens when the silence comes, when the pause stretches out longer than it should, when the person who walked in certain finds out they were wrong. That is where the story is. That is why you keep coming back. And what happens today in this room is exactly the kind of story that makes people stay, because the best stories are not the ones that shout. They are the ones that let the silence do the work and the truth arrive on its own schedule. To understand how Trump's attack fell apart, we have to go back to the morning this all started. We have to go back to the planning meeting where his team decided that the best way to raise money was to go to Chicago and attack the man whose library they were standing in, to raise money by tearing down someone else's legacy instead of building up their own. We have to go back to the moment when Trump said, "Yes, let's do it. Let's go to Obama's library and show them what a real president looks like." And the people around him nodded, because they had learned long ago that nodding was easier than explaining why the plan was flawed. Why walking into a building named after your political opponent and insulting it in front of their supporters was not the victory lap Trump believed it would be. The Obama Presidential Library was not just a building. It was a statement. It was 8 years of policy and principle, and the first black president of the United States, made permanent in marble and glass, and the kind of architecture that tells you something about who was important enough to build it and why. The building sat in Chicago's South Side, in a neighborhood that had produced Barack Obama before it produced the presidency, before it produced the library, before it produced the museum and the gardens and the archive that would hold the records of what had happened in the years when he was the one making the decisions that shaped the country. The building had opened 18 months earlier. It had been visited by millions of people. It had been praised by architects and criticized by politicians and celebrated by the communities it was built to serve. It was, by any measure, a success. And Donald Trump had decided that the best way to raise money for his campaign was to walk into that building and call it a failure. He arrived at 2:47 in the afternoon. He was 43 minutes late, which was intentional, which was his way of saying, "I do not have to follow your schedule even when I am in your house." He wore a red tie and a navy suit, and the particular expression of a man who believed that being late was a power move, and that walking into a room late was the same as telling the room that it worked on his time, and not the other way around. His entourage filled the lobby. There were donors and strategists and journalists, and the kind of people who always traveled with someone like Trump, people who had learned to follow and nod and never disagree in public no matter what the idea being proposed was or how obviously flawed it was. They had come to raise money. They had come to attack. They come to stand in Barack Obama's house and tell the people who lived there that everything they had built was worthless. Obama was waiting for them, not in the lobby, not at the entrance. He was in the building because the building was his and because the event was being held there and because he had decided months earlier, when the campaign first asked if they could use the library for a fundraiser, that he would be present. He had known what Trump would try to do. He had known that the invitation was not really an invitation but a challenge, a way of putting Obama in a position where he would have to defend himself in his own house, while Trump played the role of the outsider coming to tell the truth that no one else would say. Obama had considered refusing. He had considered saying no, this is not a good idea, I do not want to be in the same room as that man while he raises money by attacking me. But he had decided in the end that refusing would look like fear, and that fear was something he could not afford to show. Not in this moment, not in this building, not in front of the people who had supported him for 8 years, and were now watching to see how he would handle the challenge that had been issued in their presence. He was in the green room when Trump arrived. The green room was a small space behind the main hall where speakers could wait before they were introduced. It had a couch and a mirror, and a table with water bottles, and the kind of generic art that gets placed in rooms that are meant to be functional rather than beautiful. Obama sat on the couch with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled up, and his hands folded in his lap. He was reviewing notes but not really reading them. He was thinking about what Trump would say and how he would respond, and whether he would respond at all or simply let the attack land and move on as if it had not happened. Which was sometimes the best response to an attack, to give it no oxygen, to let it die in the silence that follows when no one reacts to it, the way the attacker hoped they would. The event was a fundraiser for down-ballot Democrats. That was the official purpose. The room was full of people who had paid thousands of dollars to be there, who had come because they believed in the cause, or because they wanted to see Obama, or because they wanted to be in the same room as power and proximity, was its own reward. There were tables arranged in rows and a stage at the front, and a podium where speakers would stand and say the things they had come to say. The walls were decorated with photographs from Obama's presidency, images of moments that had been significant, moments that people in the room remembered because they had lived through them, because they had voted for the man who had lived through them too, and were now being asked to remember what it had been like to believe that something was possible that had never been possible before. Trump was introduced first. That was part of the arrangement. He would speak before Obama. He would attack before Obama had a chance to defend. He would set the tone and frame the narrative and hope that by the time Obama stood at the podium, the room would already be so poisoned by Trump's words that nothing Obama said could undo the damage. It was a strategy. It was the kind of strategy that had worked for Trump before, in other rooms, in front of other audiences, in the endless series of confrontations that had defined his political career. He believed it would work here too. He believed that the room would bend to him the way rooms had always bent to him, that the audience would cheer when he attacked and jeer when he mocked and forget, by the end of the night, that they had come to support the very thing he was tearing down. He walked onto the stage at 3:31. The applause was polite but not enthusiastic. These were Obama's supporters. They had not come to hear Trump, they had come to hear Obama. Trump understood this. He understood that he was not the main event, that he was the warm-up act, that he was the thing people were enduring until the person they had actually paid to see took the stage. This bothered him. It had always bothered him, the idea that he was secondary to anyone, that there was a room somewhere where he was not the most important person in it. He had decided long ago that he would not be secondary. He would not be the warm-up act. He would make this room about him even if he had to make it about him by attacking the person who was supposed to be the main event. The attack started small. It always started small, with Trump saying things that seemed like normal political criticism, the kind of thing that could be dismissed as partisan boilerplate, the kind of thing that audiences had heard so many times it no longer registered as controversial. He talked about the economy. He talked about foreign policy. He talked about the things that presidents are always being criticized for, the things are never quite as good as they should be and never quite as bad as their opponents claim. He was competent. He was professional. He was doing the thing that political speakers do when they are warming up a room for someone else, which was laying the groundwork for the attack that would come later, the attack that would be the real reason he was there. And then the attack came. It came the way Trump's attacks always came, which was suddenly, without warning, in the middle of a sentence that seemed like it was going somewhere ordinary, and then veered into something sharp and personal and designed to wound. He was talking about legacy. He was talking about what presidents leave behind when they leave office. And then he said the words that changed everything. Speaking of leaving things behind, Trump said, "Let's talk about this building, this monument, this library. All due respect, and I have a lot of respect, but this is a monument to failure. This is a building that was built to honor a man who failed to deliver on every promise he made. The walls are covered with photographs of moments that did not matter. The displays show policies that did not work. The only thing worth preserving in this place is the gift shop where they sell the hats. And I noticed they are not selling my hats. They are selling other hats. Hats that say things that did not happen. Hats for a president who did not make America great again. Hats for a failure. The room went quiet. Not the quiet of agreement. Not the quiet of people who had been persuaded by what they heard. The quiet of people who were waiting to see what would happen next, who were watching Obama to see if he would respond, who were holding their breath in the way that rooms hold their breath when something has happened that cannot be unhappened, and everyone is waiting to see how the person who was attacked will react. Trump was smiling. He was performing the smile he always performed after an attack landed, the smile that said, "I said what needed to be said and you cannot refute it and the room knows it and you know it too." He was waiting for the jeers. He was waiting for the groans. He was waiting for the signs of damage, the faces that showed he had struck a nerve, the reactions that would confirm that his attack had worked, and he had won the room even though he was supposed to be the warm-up act and not the main event. The silence that followed was 12 seconds long. This was the first silence. It came right at the 8-minute mark, right on schedule, the silence that builds the kind of audience that keeps watching videos like this one. It was the silence of a room that had just heard something it would not forget. It was the silence of Trump waiting for a reaction and not getting one, waiting for damage and not seeing it, waiting for the moment when the attack would land and the room would turn against Obama and he would be proven right about everything he had said. The silence was not giving him what he wanted. The silence was just standing there, holding space, refusing to do the work he had expected it to do. Obama was standing at the edge of the stage. He had been there the whole time. He had watched Trump give the speech. He had watched the attack land or not land, or land in a way that was different from what Trump expected. He had watched Trump's face as the 12 seconds passed and nothing happened, and the room stayed quiet, and the reaction Trump had been waiting for did not come. Obama's face was calm. Obama's face was the face of a man who had been in rooms like this before, who had been attacked before, who knew exactly what was happening and what it meant, and what he was going to do about it. He was not going to attack back. He was not going to defend himself. He was not going to do any of the things that Trump expected him to do because those were the things that would make Trump's attack work. Would turn the room into a battlefield where Obama was on the defensive, and Trump was on the offensive, and the narrative would be about the attack, instead of about the thing the attack was trying to distract from. He was going to do something else. He was going to let the silence continue. He was going to let the room absorb what had been said. He was going to let the audience make their own judgment about whether a building that bore Obama's name was really a monument to failure or whether it was something else, something that Trump could not see because he had never built anything that was not meant to be torn down. At 3:52, Obama walked onto the stage. The applause was different this time. It was not polite. It was not the kind of applause that audiences give to speakers they are prepared to listen to. It was the kind of applause that audiences give to someone who has just been attacked and is about to respond, the kind of applause that carries approval and expectation and the particular energy of people who are about to see something. They have been waiting to see. It was loud. It was sustained. It went on for nearly 30 seconds, and when it finally died down, the room was different, was ready, was paying attention in a way that it had not been paying attention to Trump. Obama stood at the podium. He looked at the audience. He did not look at Trump, who was standing at the side of the stage with his arms crossed, waiting to see what would happen next, waiting to see if his attack had done the damage he had hoped it would do. Obama looked at the audience and he smiled, and the smile was not the smile of a man who had been hurt by what he had just heard. It was the smile of a man who was about to do something that Trump had not expected and did not know how to handle. "Thank you, Donald," Obama said. His voice was calm. His voice was the voice of a man who had spent 8 years being the President of the United States and had learned in that time that the way you survive an attack is by not acting like you have been attacked, by not giving the attacker the reaction they are looking for, by not turning the room into a place where you are defending yourself against something that does not deserve to be defended against. "I want to talk about the library," Obama said. "I want to talk about why we built it and what it means and whose legacy it represents. But first, I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank you for your support over the years, and I want to tell you a story." The room was listening. This is what composure looks like. This is what composure looks like when it is working. It is not the dramatic counterattack. It is not the devastating rebuttal. It is the choice to tell a story instead of firing a shot, to let the audience hear something that matters instead of watching two men fight over something that does not. Obama understood this. He had been understanding it his entire life, in the law offices where he had worked before he was a senator, in the state senate where he had learned how to survive in rooms full of people who did not want him there, in the years when he was running for president, and being told that a black man could never be elected, and proving them wrong one state at a time. He had learned that the best weapon against an attack was not another attack but a story, something that gave the audience something to hold on to, something that shifted the conversation from defense to something else, something that made the attack seem small by comparison. I grew up in this neighborhood, Obama said, this specific neighborhood. I grew up in apartments that were not as nice as the ones in this building. I grew up going to schools that did not have the resources that schools in richer neighborhoods had. I grew up watching people who looked like me get told, over and over again, that the things they wanted to achieve were not possible for people like them. And then I became president. And then we built this library. And now I want to show you something. Obama turned and walked toward the wall behind the podium. There was a photograph there, a large photograph that had been there since the library opened, a photograph that showed Obama standing in the Oval Office on the night of his first election, surrounded by staffers and advisors, and the people who had been in the room when the results came in and the country changed forever. Obama pointed to the photograph. He pointed to the faces in it. He pointed to the people who looked like the people in the audience, the people who had come from the same neighborhoods and the same backgrounds and the same circumstances that Obama had come from. These people, Obama said, did not fail, they worked, they fought, they won, and this library is not a monument to failure. It is a monument to what is possible when people who have been told they cannot do something decide to do it anyway. That is what this building represents, that is what we built, and I am proud of it. The room was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet now. It was the quiet of a room that had just heard something that mattered, something that was not about politics or policy or the things that Trump had been attacking. It was about identity. It was about legacy. It was about the question of who gets to decide what failure means and who gets to build the things that outlast them. Trump was still standing at the side of the stage. His arms were still crossed. His face was doing something that faces do when they are trying to figure out what is happening and why the attack they launched is not having the effect they expected. He had called the library a monument to failure. He had expected the audience to agree, or at least to doubt, or at least to wonder if maybe there was something to what he was saying. Instead, Obama had turned the attack into a story about where he came from and what he had built, and why the attack was wrong. Obama had taken the weapon Trump had tried to use and turned it into something else, something that did not defend against the attack but reframed it, made it seem small, made it seem like what it was, which was an attempt to tear down something that had been built with hard work and sacrifice, and the belief that things could be better than they had been before. The silence that followed was 17 seconds long. This was the second silence. It came at the 16-minute mark, right on schedule. It was the silence of Trump realizing that he had miscalculated, that the room was not going to give him the reaction he wanted, that the attack he had planned as the centerpiece of his speech was now the thing that everyone would remember about the speech, but not in the way he had intended. They would remember it as the moment when Obama responded calmly and confidently, and turned the attack into a story about what had actually been built, and who it was built for. They would remember it as the moment when Trump tried to humiliate Obama in his own house, and Obama refused to be humiliated, refused to play the role Trump had written for him, refused to be the wounded target that the attack required him to be. Obama turned back to the audience. I want to talk about one more thing, he said. I want to talk about what we do next, because that is what this library is really about. It is not about me. It is about what comes next. It is about the next generation of leaders who are going to walk through these doors and learn what is possible and decide what they want to build. That is the legacy that matters, not the building, not the photographs. The people who come after us, and what they decide to do with what we leave them. He paused, he looked at Trump. For the first time since he had walked onto the stage, he looked directly at the man who had attacked him. Donald, Obama said, and his voice was calm, the way it had been calm the whole time, without anger, without aggression, without any of the things that Trump would have used as evidence that he had struck a nerve. You said this building is a monument to failure. I would invite you to look around. Look at the people in this room. Look at the young people who are here tonight, who came because they believe in something and want to be part of it. Look at the photographs on the walls. These are not failures. These are people who tried, and trying is not failure. Failing to try is failure. Standing on the sidelines and attacking the people who are trying to build something is failure. That is the only failure I see in this room tonight. The room went silent. The silence was 23 seconds long. This was the third silence. It came at the 23-minute mark, right on schedule. It was the silence of a room that had just heard something that could not be taken back, something that would be replayed and quoted, and turned into everything that moments like this get turned into in the world we live in now, where everything is recorded and everything is shared, and everything becomes part of the permanent record of what happened in a room on a particular day when a man who had come to attack discovered that he had been turned into the thing he was trying to create, which was a failure. Which was someone who stood on the sidelines and attacked the people who were trying to build something. Trump opened his mouth. He was going to say something. He was going to respond, to defend himself, to attack back, to do any of the things that he always did when someone said something that challenged him. But he stopped. He looked at the room. He looked at the faces that were watching him. He looked at the silence that was hanging in the air and understood in that moment that the silence was not going to give him what he wanted, was not going to turn into applause or agreement or any of the things he had expected when he decided to attack. The silence was just standing there, holding space, waiting for him to say something, and knowing that whatever he said would be measured against what Obama had just said and would be found wanting. He closed his mouth. He did not speak. The room watched him not speak. The cameras recorded him not speaking. The nation would see, on television screens and phones and in bars where people gathered to watch and comment and share, the moment when Donald Trump stood at the side of a stage in Barack Obama's library and discovered that he had nothing to say. Obama smiled. It was not a smile of victory. It was not a smile of triumph. It was the smile of a man who had done what he came to do, which was not to defeat Trump but to be himself, to tell his story, to let the room see who he was and what he believed, and why the attack had not landed the way Trump had intended. He turned back to the audience. "Thank you for being here tonight," he said. "Thank you for your support, and thank you for reminding me why we built this place. It was not for us, it was for you. It was for every one who comes after us and wants to see what is possible. That is the legacy. That is the only thing that matters." The applause was loud. It was sustained. It was the kind of applause that audiences give to someone who has just won something without fighting for it, who has just shown them who they really are and let them decide for themselves whether to believe it. It went on for nearly a minute, and when it finally died down, Obama stepped away from the podium and walked off the stage, and the room was left to absorb what had happened and what it would mean for all the days and weeks and months that would follow. Trump stood at the side of the stage for another 30 seconds. He was waiting for something. He was not sure what. He was waiting for the room to acknowledge him, to thank him for being there, to treat him like the powerful figure he believed himself to be. But the room was not paying attention to him anymore. The room was talking among themselves, processing what they had just seen, sharing their impressions with the people next to them. Trump was irrelevant. He had become the thing he had come to make Obama, which was someone who was standing on the sidelines while the real story unfolded without them. He walked off the stage. He did not speak to the journalists who were waiting in the lobby. He did not answer the questions that were being shouted at him as he walked toward the exit. He walked with the particular pace of a man who is trying to hold something together that is in danger of falling apart. The pace of someone who has just discovered that the attack they launched did not land, and they do not know how to handle the feeling of having failed in front of an audience they were trying to impress. The room was empty by 4:47. The staff members began the process of resetting the stage for whatever would come next. The photographs were still on the walls. The gift shop was still selling hats, but not the hats Trump had mentioned. The library was still there, still standing, still the monument to what was possible that Obama had described, still the thing that Trump had tried to tear down and failed. Obama was in the green room. He was putting his jacket back on. He was preparing to leave, to go home, to think about what had happened and what it meant. He had not planned what he would say. He had not rehearsed the response. He had simply done what he always did when someone attacked him, which was to be himself, to tell his story, to let the truth speak for itself. He had not defeated Trump. He had simply refused to be defeated by him, and that had been enough. Trump drove away from the library at 4:23 in the afternoon. The sun was out, the traffic was moving. The world was doing exactly what the world does, continuing in its ordinary way, while a man who had just been diminished sat in the back of a car and thought about what had happened and what it would mean. He did not speak. he looked out the window. He did not turn on the television or pick up his phone or do any of the things he normally did to fill the space between moments. He just sat there. He just looked. He just thought about the silence that had followed his attack and the calm in Obama's voice, and the way the room had not given him what he wanted no matter how hard he had tried to take it. And the room he had left behind was empty and quiet, and still held the shape of what had happened there, the ghost of the 12-second silence, the echo of the 17-second silence. The weight of the 23-second silence that had come after Obama had held up the mirror and shown the room exactly who Trump was and what he had been doing, and why it was failure and not success, and why the building on the wall was not a monument to the thing Trump was trying to attack, but a monument to the thing Trump had never understood. Which was that building something is not the same as tearing something down, and trying is not the same as failing, and the people who stand on the sidelines and attack the people who are trying to build something are the only failures in the room. This story will keep working for the people who watched it the way it worked for the people in that room. The ones who stayed until the end, the ones who understood that the best moments are not the ones that shout. They are the ones that sit quietly and wait for you to understand what has happened and what it means, and why it will matter long after the room has emptied, and the lights have been turned off, and the only thing left is the truth, sitting in the building that bears its name, waiting for anyone who wants to understand what it actually means. That is the story. That is the silence. That is the thing that stays with you after the room is empty, and the transcript is sealed, and the cameras have moved on to the next thing, and the man who tried to humiliate someone in their own house has gone somewhere to be alone with what happened and what it will mean for everything that comes next. The attack was real, the performance was real, the confidence was real, but so was the calm, and the calm does not care about attacks or performances or confidence. The calm only shows what is there. And what was there in that room on that day was a man who had been attacked and had chosen not to attack back, who had been humiliated and had chosen not to be humiliated, who had been given the opportunity to fight and had chosen instead to tell a story, which was the story of his life and the lives of the people who had worked with him and the building that had been built to honor what they had all done together. That is the end of the story. But it is not the end of what the story means. Because the story is not really about Donald Trump or Barack Obama or a library on Chicago's South Side on a particular afternoon. The story is about the moment when anyone at all, discovers that the attack they launched has not landed the way they expected, and the person they attacked has refused to play the role they wrote for them. The story is about the moment when confidence meets composure and composure wins, because composure does not have to fight to win. It only has to wait. It only has to be itself. It only has to let the truth speak for itself while the attacker runs out of things to say and stands in the silence realizing that they have lost something they did not know they were competing for. That moment happens to people every day, in small rooms and big rooms, in rooms where cameras are rolling and rooms where no one is watching. The moment is always the same. The moment is when you realize that the person you are attacking has decided not to be your enemy, has decided not to fight on your terms, has decided to be something else entirely, and in being something else has made your attack irrelevant, has made your presence in the room irrelevant, has made you the failure you were trying to make them. And when that moment comes, the only question is what you do next. Do you attack again? Do you try to find a new angle? Do you keep fighting even though the room has already decided? Or do you stand in the silence and let the truth be the thing that settles everything? That is the question. That is always the question. And it is the question that this channel is built on, the question that brings you back, the question that keeps you watching. The question that matters long after the room is empty, and the lights are off, and the only thing left is the moment when someone stood in Barack Obama's library and discovered that the library belonged to Barack Obama, and the silence that followed belonged to Barack Obama, and the story that was told belonged to Barack Obama, and the only thing he could do was stand there and watch and realize that he had forgotten, for a few minutes at least, whose library it was. That is why you stay. That is why we tell the stories. That is the thing that never gets old. The silence in that room was 12 seconds long the first time, and 17 seconds long the second time, and 23 seconds long the third time. The silences are still happening. Somewhere in some room, in some moment that is happening right now, or will happen tomorrow, or will happen years from now. There is a silence that is exactly that long and exactly that heavy and exactly that full of the moment when a person discovers that the attack has not landed, and the person they attacked has refused to play the role they wrote for them, and the only thing left is to stand in the silence and let the truth be the thing that takes over, the thing that settles everything. The thing that stays long after the words have faded, and the people have gone and the room is just a room again, waiting for the next story to come through its doors and take up residence in its walls and its photographs and its gift shop, where they sell hats that say things that actually happened. That is the thing. That is the only thing. That is the thing that stays.